One of the beautiful things about justice movements and equity efforts is how they learn from each other and share with each other. This morning, we continue exploring equity and focus on access to full participation for people who are differently abled. There's much to be learned about building beloved community, both in the literal physical sense and the metaphorical sense. Tearing down barriers to expand our welcome is what we're all about, after all. A few years ago, I say that, it was actually about 5 years ago, as we were planning on how to convert this old office space building into this beautiful sanctuary, I had the pleasure of meeting with our architect several times. There was a lot to accomplish and a very limited budget. And of course, there were a lot of regulations to consider here in California. I eventually realized there were two pretty different ways of looking at bringing this old office building up to code for our purposes. One way of seeing things was a very expensive checklist of legal requirements, including fire safety, structural integrity, environmental impact, and access for people with disabilities. So many hoops to jump through. The other way of thinking of things was, within our budget, how are we going to create space that embodies our values? After all, these regulations are what we care about. Energy efficiency and access for all. These are our values. There's a design philosophy that takes this second way of thinking into account. It's called universal design. Universal design is the design of an environment so it can be accessed, understood, and used to the greatest extent possible by all people, regardless of their age, size, ability, or disability. Any building, product, or service should be designed to meet the needs of all people who wish to use it. What a novel idea. As the name suggests, universal design is not simply designed for people with disabilities. Rather, it's a fundamental condition of good design. If an environment is accessible, if it's convenient, if it's a pleasure to use, everyone benefits. The example often used to talk about this way that people benefit is wheelchair cutouts at street corners. Yes, those ramps make the sidewalk more accessible for people using wheelchairs or scooters. They also make way for parents using strollers, or people making deliveries with dollies, or children on bicycles, and a long list of other scenarios. We all benefit when disability rights activists said, "We think there's got to be a better way than these curbs," and designers began to listen. We can look at universality from a design perspective. We can also look at universality of people needing assistance. Too often we think of people who are differently abled as a small, static subset of the community. While there are people with atypical bodies and needs, I invite you to think more broadly about this category. There are also people who transition in and out of disability based on how an underlying condition is showing up. Multiple sclerosis, fibromyalgia, various cancers, and many other conditions have dynamic symptoms. The impacts come and go, calling for occasional various forms of assistance. And the obvious variable here is age. We are all born needing a tremendous amount of support from others to survive and navigate the world. For a chunk of time, most people are able to have relative independence. And eventually, most of us, as we age, return to needing support of other people and devices. For a time, most of us are temporarily abled. But universally, we need each other to make our way in life. One aspect of universal design that I still want to mention is that it is proactive. Rather than responding to individuals after they arrive, universal design tries to anticipate the needs of various types of users. That's not going to be perfect, and sometimes users will have competing needs. Still, designers do what they can to anticipate folks who might arrive. Now, think about it yourself. Having someone accommodate our needs after we ask could make us feel special. More often than not, it's going to make us feel like a burden. The good friend or host tries to meet our needs in advance. Just think of showing up at your friend's house and they have your favorite drink on hand because they know you like it. Or they have a vegetarian or vegan option for dinner for you because they know you. Again, it's not perfect. We're not going to know everyone's needs. But when we get it right, it can make a huge difference in the way people feel welcomed. And those gestures of welcome aren't just for the people who need them. Just in the way family members of LGBTQ people feel like their family is welcomed into a business that has a pride flag or something, the loved ones of people with disabilities notice, oh, I could navigate this space with my partner easily. We're welcome to be here fully as a family. That feels good. We can't anticipate the needs of everyone who might come through our door, but there are some obvious ways that we do that, and some ways that we might do better at making space at the table. I want to talk a little bit about specifics here at Tapestry. Today, for the first time, Nikki and I introduced ourselves using visual descriptions. Perhaps it felt odd. Perhaps it felt like a waste of time. Perhaps you were grateful for the first time to hear a description of what you could not see. Perhaps you felt glad your needs were being met without having asked. The first time I encountered this practice was at General Assembly, our annual National UU meeting. I will admit, I felt strange when I first saw this. Visual descriptions are a concise list of relevant descriptors. They might include height, age, hairstyle, race, clothes, accessories, disabilities, and physical environment. You might try it. It can be useful to people who are blind or people who are having some vision difficulties. I can't count the number of you who have had cataract issues in the past 2 years. Or these days, someone might be listening on Zoom and flying down the freeway at 70 miles per hour. There are several ways that it helps. For people on Zoom today, we are experimenting with automated closed captioning. I'm not sure if we have gotten that turned on. I hope so. Viewers can turn it off on their end if they find it distracting, but it has to be a default setting for anyone to have it. So we're experimenting with that. As I put in the newsletter article this past month, we are ordering chairs with arms. Those have been purchased for people who need some support to stand or sit down comfortably. Consider leaving those chairs for the people who need them. Outside on our patio, you may have noticed one of the tables looks like there's a bench missing. That's actually space for people who use a wheelchair to access, or people who like to sit on their walker. Consider leaving that space open as well. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention, like many houses of worship, the primary space that is not accessible to people with limited mobility is this: the chancel and the pulpit. The place of authority is functionally not accessible. We can improve that, I think, together. I was so pleased to find our Time for All Ages story today. "What happened to you?" asked the other kids on the playground. It is always, always best to start conversations with what we have in common instead of what we have different. Then, once we feel and know the shared humanity in each other's experience, we might venture into talking more openly about things that make us different. No one wants to be seen as a single label or to speak for all people who share a particular identity. For many of us, whether we are queer or Asian American or disabled, having those pieces of our identity honored and not erased is important. And no one wants their entire humanity reduced to one label. Some differences are visually obvious, others are quite well hidden. My vision is so poor, it would be impossible for me to function in daily life without corrective eyewear. My nearsightedness is so strong that to read printed material, I have to hold it so close that my eyes go crossed before I can read it. I suspect there are others of you with similar vision challenges. Some of you get assistance with hearing aids. Those technologies help us navigate in a sort of stealth mode or a socially acceptable mode. Others of you live with chronic health conditions. Physical and mental health challenges occasionally make it difficult to accomplish daily tasks. So you live with an uneasiness of not fully trusting your bodies and navigate over and over how much to tell your friends and coworkers about your situation. Others of you navigate chronic pain or injury-related pain. You muscle through the discomfort, determined to live your life and not be a burden on others. Please know that you are seen and respected. However you choose to show up or identify or take care of yourself. We are here to accompany each other. We're spending a whole month with the theme of equity in our worship service. This can be confusing to people new to Unitarian Universalism, or even those who have been here for a long time. Why do we spend so much time talking about racism and LGBTQ issues, and now he's prattling on about disabilities? Is this about being a political organization? Is this virtue signaling and attempt to prove how woke Unitarian Universalists are? Well, the emphasis on equity is about defending legal rights for all of our neighbors. It is about making sure everyone gets what they need to thrive in the world that is still very uneven. And this is our faith in action. Cornel West famously said, "Justice is what love looks like in public, and tenderness is what love looks like in private." At Tapestry, an abundant, wholehearted welcome to all our neighbors is what universalism looks like when we put our faith into action. We know the root of universalism was about universal salvation. It's an understanding that no loving God would condemn people to eternal suffering and punishment, especially not for the random accident of being born human. God is much more interested in forgiveness than punishment. Surely, if anyone is saved, then everyone must be. Now, that sort of talk of God and vision of afterlife may seem far afield from our lives and our understanding of the world today. But here's the deal. Universalism is much, much bigger than who Peter lets in at the pearly gates of heaven. Universalism is about a love that is big enough for everyone. Everyone. Our commitment to welcome our neighbors is not about being woke or about aligning with a political party. It's definitely not about tapping into demographic shifts to grow our membership. Our commitment to offering abundant welcome and building beloved community is putting our faith in a big, universal love into action. Perhaps the best story about this kind of love is the parable of the prodigal son. Due to the limitations of time, I'm going to boil down this amazing story, but if I can give you homework, it is to go actually read it. A father had 2 sons. The younger son asked his father to give him his inheritance in advance, as unpopular then as it would be today. He took the money and went out to a foreign land and totally squandered it on wild living. About the time he ran out of money, a famine came to that land, and he realized that he had made some tremendous mistakes. As he was starving, he realized that his father's servants were doing better than he was, so he decided to return home, offering to be a servant to his own father. Upon his return, the father greeted the missing son with a lavish feast. But the older brother was really mad. The older brother had been the good son. For years, he followed the rules. He stayed home and helped his dad, doing anything he asked. He was the good son. He was the one that deserved the party, he thought. And that's where the story ends, without a real resolution. The father throws a big party for the returned son, and the good son is left angry and sulking outside of the tent. The prodigal son paints a challenging picture of the sacred. Love and grace are available for all. It is an unrestrained love, and it gives us a choice. Will we remain outside of the tent, sulking, judging, pompously assuming that we have the authority over who should have access? Or will we pull wide the curtains, welcoming all who would enter, and join the lavish, abundant feast laid out for anyone and everyone who would come and enjoy it? Our task is to let go of our sense of pride and control and to settle into the goodness that life has to offer, accepting the fact that everyone is invited to the party is the only way we can truly join the celebration. Our commitment to accessibility for as many people as possible, or to LGBTQ equality or equity across racial lines, or women's rights over their own bodies are not primarily political. They are the natural and necessary fruit of our understanding of the sacred, a love that is universal. So big that the only ones who get left out of the party are those who choose to stand outside of love in judgment. The circle grows from the periphery, not from the center. So let us join our differently abled friends, our LGBTQ neighbors, our BIPOC leaders, and the endangered earth to expand the circle of love until no one is left out. Amen.